Hello and welcome to session 11 of the Biosafety and Biosecurity Mentorship Program for Northwestern Province. So in this session, we're going to look at the part 5 of the biorisk assessment sessions. So we just finished the part 4 where we looked at the biosafety risk assessment sessions. So in this session, we'll concentrate on the biosecurity risk assessment, specifically on how to use the Excel template. So let's get started. So this template has 4 sheets that are the main sheets. We have the asset assessment, we have the process map, and the risk register. So some of which we also have in the other types of assessments. That is the biosafety risk assessment. We had the similar types of sheets as well. So we will start with the asset assessment, just as we started with the agent assessment in the biosafety risk assessment. So the first thing you need to do is you need to indicate the activity as well as the area which you are assessing. So you indicate the lab itself. Is it the hematology lab, or are you calling section 1, or are you calling it lab 1 and the like? So you indicate the section as well as the lab. That's what, if you are calling it the lab, the bench, the specific bench you are actually assessing. Then after that, you indicate the procedure. Then you need to indicate who did the assessment. So if there's more than one person that did the assessment, you can indicate their names just under this part. So if maybe there's another person who did this assessment, you can indicate their name there and proceed. But then for this template, mostly the names are entered as well. So maybe this will not accept my input. So for the template that I'll share later on, it will have an open part where you're supposed to enter the name of the person who did the assessment. Okay. All right. So the next part, this is where you're indicating the name of the person or the key person who did the review. Of course, there may be more than one person as well. So you may indicate the name of the other people under the register where you're indicating the risk assessment team. So after that, you go to the hazard identification, or the identification of the valuable biological materials or agents or assets. So under biosecurity risk assessment, we are not analyzing all the biological agents that we are handling. Mostly we are trying to look at those biological agents that may be of value to people that may come and get them. So we're talking about something that an adversary may want to come in and get. So that is what we are mostly assessing in biosecurity. So the agents that maybe you indicate under valuable biological materials may be those agents that may be of high consequence or high risk as compared to the other types of biological agents. So you can indicate those high consequence agents, or you can indicate all the agents and then determine which ones of these may be of more value to the adversary. So like we described, adversaries may either be inside or outsider. So we will look at that later on. Then for this part, this is where you're indicating the other valuable materials. So we are saying what other valuable materials can be in the lab. So this is where you indicate your chemicals and your toxins. Then under there, that's why you're putting your other valuable materials, such as your results and inventories. Then you have your equipment and other types of valuable materials. But for this particular session, we're mostly looking at biorisk. So we'll concentrate on the biological agents, and we will not really touch the other types of valuable materials. So after you do your hazard identification, then you maybe identify 2 biological agents that may be of value to you as a laboratory. So maybe you have identified SARS-CoV-2 as well as your HIV as your valuable biological materials. So after you do the identification, the next part is you need to look at how are these biological materials assets, that what is the special thing about these agents that makes them assets. So we're going to look at how you do the asset assessment. Then also we are going to look at the vulnerabilities. So after we do the asset assessment, we do the vulnerability checks. So of course, the vulnerability, mostly we are checking the 5 pillars of biosecurity. So we're going to look at that after the asset assessment. Then after you look at the asset assessment and the vulnerabilities, you may do an adversary check. But then sometimes adversary check may be done by actually determining the initial risk of either theft or the risk of diverge or the risk of misuse, because the risk of theft will tell you that there is an outsider type of adversary, but then if there is an increase of misuse and diverge, it will tell you that there is mostly insider adversaries that want to come in and get your assets. So you go to the asset assessment. So let's go to the asset assessment. So under asset assessment, what we're mostly looking at is what makes these biological agents special, such that if it's special, someone would want to come and get it. So in this case, we're saying, what are the characteristics about this biological agent that make them high consequence or increase the chances of someone coming to get it, because they will be attracted maybe by how it can be easily disseminated or how it can quickly kill a lot of people, for lack of a better term, how it can spread from one person to the other quicker maybe than the other type of biological agents. So if something has a more, let's say, virulence, maybe it has more transmissibility, it has a lot of more strangers, most likely that particular biological agent will be considered more valuable, and therefore it will be an asset that someone might want to come and get and release it, either to harm people or for financial benefit and the like. So let's look at these biological agents that we've identified. So we're going to look at SARS-CoV-2. So under the agent characteristics or asset assessment, you're mostly looking at something or the characteristics about the agent, but also you're trying to ask certain questions that will tell you something about how valuable it may be to an adversary. So the first question you ask is, can the agent cause serious disease if released in the lab, the hospital, or the environment? So if it can cause serious disease, it means that it can maybe harm a lot of people quicker, and then people may even die, as compared to something that cannot cause serious disease. So here you answer a yes or no. So if it's yes, then you are saying yes, it can cause serious disease. So if you answer yes, or if your answer is yes here, it means the chances of someone wanting to come and get this biological agent increases. So the likelihood that someone would want to come and steal it increases, or someone wanting to misuse it increases as well. The next question is, does the agent have therapeutic or preventative treatment, or is there an immunization type of, or does it have a vaccine per se? So if you say yes here, it means that this agent has treatment, and then also there is a vaccine for this particular biological agent. But then if you say no, it means that this agent, if you get exposed to it, you cannot get treatment, And also you cannot get the pre-exposure type of prophylaxis where you're getting maybe immunized or you're getting pre-exposure prophylaxis. So what that means is that this agent now, if you say yes, becomes more valuable than something which has treatment and has a vaccine available. The next question is the agent a public health concern? So if the agent is a public health concern, it means that if this agent is released into the public, it can cause serious population problems. It can cause serious financial problems, which means also it has an effect on the economy. So if you say yes, then this one also becomes more valuable as well. But if you say no, it means someone may not really want to come and get this particular agent. So the next question is, are there cost implications either to the lab, hospital or environment, or the nation or the province if the agent was to be stolen for possible bioterrorism or malicious use? So are there cost implications? So maybe if this agent is stolen and someone releases it to people who exposes people to this particular agent, will there be some financial costs to you, the lab who kept it? Will there be financial costs to the province, to the institution itself, to the country itself? So if there are financial costs, it means that the implication or the impact after exposure will be greater as compared to an agent with no financial cost. And therefore, this one becomes more valuable, which has more of financial implications or costs. So the next part is, what is the agent route of exposure? So what is the agent's route of exposure? So I think we already described what the various routes of exposure will tell you about either the likelihood and the consequence, maybe sometimes, of your security risks. So you indicate the type of exposure or the type of route of exposure. So if maybe the route of exposure is inhalation, that one will be more valuable maybe compared to something which only has ingestion type of route. Host range. So what is the host range? Can it affect humans? Can it affect animals? Can it affect the environment, that is plants and other aquatic life? So can it affect all these hosts that it infects, or that they get exposed to it? So if it can, it means that if I am, for example, I'm a terrorist, it means that I may want this type of agent, because if it has multiple host ranges, I can just infect maybe cattle or a dog, and then people can still get infected by coming into contact with this particular host. And if the humans get infected or they get exposed, they have the disease and they have the illness. If they come into contact with other humans and animals, then this particular agent will be spread to the animals, to the humans, and then there will be a wider spread of this particular agent, and therefore this one becomes a bit more valuable if you add virulence to it. So if it has a higher virulence impact, it means that it is even more valuable, because then it will kill a lot of people. So hypothetically, yes, this particular agent may be of interest to me if I was an adversary than something which has only one host range. For example, if it only affects humans, it means that it will only move from one human to human and nothing in between. So there's going to be like a slower type of dissemination or slower transmission from one person to the other. as compared to something with multiple or multiple strangers. So of course, there are other types of characteristics that you can look at. So if you need more of the characteristics, you can check out the pathogen safety data sheet, which you can check out online on the Canada pathogen safety data sheets. So that's the asset assessment. So from the information that you indicate at this part, at least you would have known whether or not this particular biological agent is of value, and therefore it becomes an asset to you as a laboratory personnel. So you do the same for the other agents. So you also look at the HIV. You ask the same questions, similar to how you did it for SARS-CoV. Then the next part is your vulnerability checks. So you're doing your vulnerability characterization. So under the vulnerability characterization, we are looking at vulnerabilities or gaps in the 5 pillars of biosecurity. Because if there are gaps in the 5 pillars, it means that those are the points at which people can come into contact with your asset, and also those are the points that the asset may intentionally be exposed to people. So the 5 pillars of biosecurity are you have physical security or access control, then you have information security, we have transport security, personnel security, and inventory material and inventory control and accountability. So we are going to start with the access control or the physical security. So there are about 3 questions in this template, but then there are other questions that you may want to ask. So if you have more questions that you want to ask, you can kindly add them to this part of the template. So the first question is, does the room where you are keeping these biological agents or where you are handling this biological agent, is the room lockable? So if the room is lockable, it means that access will be limited only to people that have the lock or they have the key to that particular area. Or if it has the biometric, it means that only people who have access either by thumb access or key access can have access to that particular room. But then if the room is not lockable, what that means is that anyone can walk into that room and they will have access to your asset. So if you say yes here, at least you know your asset is safe. Then if your agent requires refrigeration at any point, either in the process or after the process, are the fridges in which it is kept, like maybe isolates of this particular agent or samples of this particular agent, are they kept in a fridge which is lockable? So if the fridge is lockable, it means that at least if maybe the room is not lockable, the fridge will be lockable, and therefore someone may have access to the room but may not have access to the fridge in which these items are kept. But then sometimes you'll find that maybe the room is not lockable and the fridges are not lockable. It means that someone will walk in and also have access to the fridge and have access to your isolates or your samples of this particular agent. The next question is, how many people have access to the room or section in which the agent is handled? So here you're talking about how many people have access. So the more the people have access, the less, the more vulnerable the agent becomes to being stolen. And the more people have access, the more insider threat you have, because maybe one of the insiders may get these items and you will not be aware, you will not actually realize that something is missing because maybe 20 people have access to your asset. So if you limit the number of people that have access, at least you would have protected, and then there will be accountability in or if this particular agent goes missing, or you suspect that someone has gotten this particular agent, at least there's accountability. At least maybe if only 3 people have access, you'll know out of the 3, this person or one of the 3 would have released or would have gotten and misused this agent. So those are the 3 questions you ask under access control. But then, of course, you can have other questions that may be related to the lab itself. So we are talking about, is the lab lockable, or is there access control to the overall lab entry doors? And then also you can look at the facility itself. So is the hospital lockable? Do you have multiple access points to the lab? So you can look at that. Then also the physical security of the lab itself, or sorry, of the facility. So we're talking about the fences and the gates. So is the hospital fenced? If it's not fenced, it means that there'll be multiple access points, but then sometimes you find that it's fenced, but then there are a lot of entry points into the facility. So this will affect how safe your asset is. The next part is your information security. So under information security, you're looking at the information about the biological agent. So maybe you may have inventories, you may have all this type of information such as results and the like that are related to the asset, and sometimes you may need to dispose of this particular agent or samples. So you may have logs that indicate that you disposed of these agents or not. So the question mostly is related to disposal of these particular samples. So does the lab keep record of when and how this agent is disposed of? So if you say yes, then you're going to say who has access to these records. So what you're trying to know is, can someone actually get the agent, and after they get the agent, then they indicate on the disposal log that this sample was disposed of, but then in the actual sense, it was stolen. So you want to limit people that have access to the disposal log, because if you find out that this was actually stolen, you would know who actually logged in on the disposal log as the sample was disposed of, and maybe it was just stolen and not disposed of. So we go to transport security. So under transport security, mostly what we're looking at is when you're transporting the samples, maybe from one facility to another or within the facility, are there any gaps where maybe the samples may be misused, stolen, or diverged? So the first question is, are all personnel who transport samples or isolates of this agent trained on how to transport this agent? So are they trained? So if they are trained, at least you know they will know how to handle this agent, and they will know the dangers of actually handling this agent, and they will be safe, safely transport these particular samples. But then if they do not know, it means that maybe they may expose themselves, and maybe during the transportation of these samples, they may leave the samples unattended to, maybe in the vehicle, because they do not know what they are carrying. And if they leave them unattended, that can now be a point of entry for an adversary who can come in and steal your samples, because you are not taking extra care of those asset type of samples. Then, is triple packaging always used when transporting these samples or isolates of this agent? So if you're not using triple packaging, it means that if there is a spillage of this particular agent, then this spill will then go and affect the environment, and people that are actually maybe transporting these agents may get exposed. Are proper shipping guidelines readily available for use by all personnel transporting this agent? So this question is similar to the training. So if people have the guidelines, it means that they'll know how to handle the agent. Then the most important question is there chain of custody when transporting samples or isolates of this agent? So is there chain of custody? So chain of custody will show how the sample moved, maybe from one referring facility to the referral facility. So it will show who collected it, maybe from the referring facility, and maybe who transported it in between. Maybe you may be sending it to a hub of some sort. So maybe if it reached the hub, who received it at the hub, and then who now got it from the hub to the referral facility, like the facility to which you are referring the samples. So there's going to be that chain of custody, who had it, so that just in case the samples goes missing, you will know at which particular point the sample went missing. Or if you are transporting 20 samples, maybe the sample started off 20 samples from the referring facility, but maybe by the time they're reaching the referral lab, there are 18 samples. You will be able to know where exactly the samples were missing. Is it at the hub, or is it maybe from the hub to the referral lab? Personnel. So under personnel, mostly you are just trying to see if the people that are handling these agents can be relied on, or are they reliable and trustworthy. So you're just doing some form of checks on each of these individuals. Inventory control. So mostly if you're keeping isolates of this agent, you need to have some form of inventory log where you're keeping the numbers of the isolates. So here you're just trying to check how many people have access to the inventory. Do you have the inventory log itself, and the like. So basically those are the 5 pillars, and that's how you check for vulnerabilities. So how you answer here will tell you something about how vulnerable your asset is. So the next part you need to do is now do the initial risk determination, which will also tell you something about your potential adversary. So let's look at the next part. So you are determining the risk. Right? So from the information that you get from your asset assessment, and also from the information on the vulnerability checks, you then do the risk of theft. So you're going to look at the risk of theft. Then you're also looking at the risk of misuse and the risk of diverging. So these risks will tell you something about your potential adversary. So if your risk of theft is high, it means that you have a potential outsider adversary. But then if you have maybe your risk of theft is lower as compared to the risk of misuse and diverge, it means that you have mostly the risk of an insider adversary. So for the determination of the risk of theft, you are going to look at the likelihood of theft and the consequence of the theft. So the likelihood of the theft will be determined mostly by the asset assessment as well as the vulnerability, because then you'll be able to know that someone may be able to steal your agent. So you just determine the likelihood, and then also you determine the consequence. Okay, then after you do the combination, then the template will let you know, or to give you the risk rating. So it's automatic, so it will tell you the risk rating. So maybe for this case, your likelihood rating was likely, and the consequence of maybe if SARS-CoV-2 was to be released into the environment, maybe that's a major. Therefore, you're going to have a high risk of theft. So like I said, if there's a high risk of theft, it means you have mostly an outsider type of adversary risk. Then you go to the risk of misuse. Okay, so risk of misuse, so you're looking at the likelihood of misuse. So can people that are actually working in the lab misuse? So is there a potential for people in the lab to misuse your samples or the agent? So you determine the likelihood and consequence. Then after you determine, you're going to have your risk output done for you there. Then the risk of diverging is by someone who may be an insider. So maybe someone can get these agents from the inside and diverge these samples. So diverging is just another term of theft for an insider. Or during transportation, someone you know may diverge these samples. So that's also theft. Of course, the means and the motives as well as the opportunity will be different if you look at the different people that can have access to these particular agents. So yeah, so after that, after you determine the risk, you then need to take the next step of mapping out the process for those risks that will have either the risk of theft, which is high, the risk of misuse high, as well as the risk of diverging. So sometimes you may find that some agents who have very low risk, which is acceptable risk for the risk of theft, misuse, and diverge. So if you find that the risk of theft, misuse, and diverge is acceptable, then you don't need to proceed with this particular agent to the process map. But then most of the time, if you've done the asset assessment correctly, and maybe if it's your first time doing a risk assessment, mostly you'll find that the risk of theft, misuse, and diverge will be high, and therefore you need to proceed with the agents that will have those risks high to the process map. So in this case, you need to have a process map. So for this case, we had a high risk of theft for SARS-CoV, a moderate or medium risk of theft for HIV. It means we need to proceed or make a process map just for SARS-CoV and another process map for HIV. Then after the process map is done, you take these identified risks in the process to the register. So in the process, it's a similar layout. So you're going to have the process laid out from the pre-examination, the examination up to the post-examination. Then at each point of the phase, you indicate what happens and how it happens. Then after you describe how it happens, you need to identify the biosecurity risks, not the biosafety risks, but the biosecurity risks in this case. So all these are biosecurity risks. Then after you identify the biosecurity risks, all these risks are then taken to your risk register. So we already described how you find, you identify the risks in the process map in the biosafety risk assessment session. So I will not really explain in detail how to go about it. So now let's look at one of the risks. So we're going to look at just maybe one of the risks which will follow up to the end, so that we see how the risks will fall. So let's pick one. Okay, so this is in the sample processing phase. So we're going to pick this one here, which is a high risk. So the scenario, the risk here so this is the examination. So this scenario can fall both in the examination and the post-examination, or the analytical and the post-analytical. So in this case, we are in the register of the SARS-CoV-2. Okay. So maybe the identified risk is COVID positive samples are not autoclaved before being disposed as biohazardous waste. So you do not autoclave your waste for confirmed SARS-CoV-2. So you have samples that have been confirmed for SARS-CoV. So before you take them to the incinerator for incineration, you're supposed to autoclave them before they leave the lab for incineration, maybe outside of the laboratory area or sometimes outside the facility. So what may this cause? So what's the potential cause of failure? So samples might be misused or used for purposes which are not intended for their use, and therefore exposing people and the environment to the pathogen. So maybe at the point of waste transportation from your facility or from your lab to the incinerator, someone may have access to these non or unautoclaved samples. And then if they have access to these samples, and maybe someone, like by someone I mean maybe an adversary, or maybe an insider or an outsider. So maybe at this particular point, you've even indicated on your disposal log that these samples have been disposed, but they are not autoclaved. So someone may get them and use them for whatever purpose they may want. So they may diverge. So maybe an insider may get them, and instead of taking them to the incinerator, they sell them to people that may now use them to harm people or other people, or they sell them to people that can use them for whatever purpose that they would want to use them. So maybe at that particular point, you as a lab, you have not put up any control measures. What that means is that maybe you do not have an autoclave. So if you do not have an autoclave, most likely you will not autoclave your waste. You will just take it directly to the incinerator, or you take it to the storage area where they'll pick it up and take it to the incinerator. So now, if you don't have an incinerator, it means that the chances of this happening is very likely, because there's no incinerator, therefore it's very likely that this will happen. And the consequence, or the same consequence you determined under maybe theft or under misuse, will be the same consequence you use here. Okay. Another thing is that if you did your biosafety risk assessment before you did your biosecurity, the consequence for your SARS-CoV, like your inherent risk for your SARS-CoV, will be the same as what you indicate here, because if people steal them, which means that they are going to release them to people, but then sometimes your consequence will not only be affected by the severity of the disease that someone will get after they get exposed. The consequence under security can also be affected by the impact on you, the people who were keeping this agent. One, the impact that this release will have on the hospital. So what's the implication on the hospital? Is there cost implications to clean up the consequence and all those things? Are you going to be compensating people after they find out that this particular agent was from your facility? Then also, what's the consequence on the population? What's the consequence on the economy of the province or country? So when you're looking at the consequence in security, mostly, we are not only looking at the severity of the disease after someone gets exposed, we're also looking at the impact that the release will have on these particular individuals that play a part, or played a part in either keeping or how can I say, manipulating these particular samples. So if your risk or your likelihood is very likely and your consequence is major, it means you're going to have a high risk. So your risk is going to be high. So let me just zoom in. So risk is going to be very high. So at this particular point, you don't even need to beat around the bush. You need to find some control measures so that you either reduce or eliminate this risk. And for you to put up measures for your high risk or high risks mostly, you may require more than three mitigations or more than one mitigations as seen from this particular example. So what are the potential causes to this particular risk? What can cause you not autoclaving the plates? So this is where you're doing your root cause analysis. So maybe COVID samples are not autoclaved before disposal, even though an autoclave dedicated for this purpose is available, because the autoclave is being kept too far from the point of waste generation. So that can be one of the reasons. You may have an autoclave, but the autoclave is kept very far from the point of waste generation, and therefore you as a personnel, you just feel the need to just discard the samples in your bin and not autoclave the waste before before the waste is taken to the incinerator. So you do not treat the waste before it goes for the final treatment. Or another reason is that autoclave dedicated for this purpose is too small to handle large sample quantities. Maybe you have a very small autoclave where you feel it will take a lot of time autoclaving large volumes of the samples, because maybe one cycle will take like 30 minutes. So now you're thinking, no, I would rather just discard them in the bin than wait that long. So maybe that may be the reason. Another reason may be members of staff and support staff not trained on how to treat this waste and the importance of autoclaving this waste before final disposal incineration. So knowledge gap, maybe people just don't know how to treat this waste. Then maybe another reason may be non-availability of good quality autoclavable biohazard waste bags. Maybe you do not have the biohazard waste bags that are autoclavable, and therefore if you use the other types of waste bags, there's going to be a lot of leaking as the autoclaving process is happening, and therefore you'd rather just discard these samples in your waste bin without treating this particular waste. So these numbers are mostly just coming from your preventive action plan or your root cause analysis. So like the biosafety risk assessment, so for each and every root cause, you need to put up a measure to either get rid of the root cause or reduce the effects of the root cause. So maybe for the first one, where COVID samples are not autoclaved because the autoclave is kept far, maybe your proposed mitigation or preventive action is to move the autoclave near to the point of waste generation for easy and quicker use. So you just move the autoclave nearer to the point of waste generation. Then for the second one, maybe your proposed mitigation may be maybe through hospital management, and maybe if you have some supporting partners in the area, you need to procure a bigger autoclave to be used for this purpose only, so to be used only for autoclaving waste. Of course, if you procure this autoclave, you need to train people on how to use the autoclave, and then after that you monitor whether or not they are doing the correct thing. So also you do some form of competency after the training. Then for the third one, where there's a knowledge gap, what you need to do maybe is just to train all members of staff on how to handle and treat this type of waste. And then finally, for the last one, where you do not have the bags, so maybe through hospital management and the supporting partners, you need to procure good quality autoclavable biohazard waste bags. So those are your proposed mitigations maybe for each of your causes. All right, so under this part, this is why I'm indicating the responsible person. So who's responsible for actually making sure that this particular mitigations or other mitigations are implemented. Maybe you have your safety officer responsible. Okay, the safety officer. Time frame, you have about 4. Maybe if you have all these 4 as your preventive action, which means you're going to have maybe a longer time frame. Maybe you're going to have for each of them, you're supposed to put a time frame. Maybe for the first one, where maybe if that's your problem, if that's your cause, where you just need to move something from, let's say, from one area to the other, maybe you can say just 1 week is enough. 1 week, you move you move the autoclave from one point to the other. Maybe for the second one, where you need to procure an autoclave, you may give it a bit of time. Maybe you need 3 months for that. Then for this one, where you need to train people on how to handle the waste, this is a low hanging, so maybe 1 week is enough for that. You don't need a longer time frame to just train people. Then maybe for procurement of the waste bags, you may need maybe a month to just sort out your issues and buy these waste bags. So here, this is where you're indicating the risk assessment team. So if there was more than one person who did the risk assessment, you indicate their names here as well. Maybe there was John Panda, maybe you had James, maybe there was Esther, and maybe other people that were part. So you indicate their names there. In this column, this is where you're indicating the status. So maybe after 1 week, you need to come and check. Since you had like a 1 week time frame, you come and check, did you implement this particular preventive action or control measure? But then in the beginning, before you even, after you just finished doing or conducting your risk assessment, obviously all these will have like a pending status. Then you need to now come back and change the pendings. So let me just number them as well. So that's for number 1. This is for the second mitigation. And then this is for the third mitigation. And then that's for the fourth mitigation. So maybe at that particular point, when you're just done with the assessment, they are still all pending. But then maybe after 1 month or 2 months, you need to come back and check, did you implement these proposed mitigations or not? Or at the time of your review, maybe it's been 3 months, you need to check whether you implemented these or not, so that you now see whether or not the mitigation worked. So maybe at the time of review, the status has changed. Maybe this is done. Maybe all of them, they are done. You've completed all your, or you've implemented all your measures that you proposed. Okay, so you say this is also done. And the fourth one, maybe by maybe the 3 months or 6 months mark, everything is done. So depending on how often you are reviewing, maybe everything is done. All right, so now if everything is done by the time you're reviewing, it means that now you need to determine your likelihood and consequence. Now, if you've implemented everything and then people are also not discarding these samples without autoclaving, so you're looking at the practice from the time of implementation to the time of review. So if people are also not discarding these samples in the waste bags, and they've not discarded the waste bags for 3 to 6 months, maybe after implementation, maybe you can say it's rare that people will do it, but then the consequence will still remain the same, which is, I think it was a major. But then if you do that, you find that your risk will reduce from a high to a low at the time of review. Okay, but then maybe after another 3 months or 6 months, you come back and you want to check again if this risk has maintained. So you need to check the measures that you put up, right? Are they working or not? So are they continuing to work? So maybe at the second review, you find that practice has changed. People have gone back to discarding samples without autoclaving. It means that there's something which is not working. So is it that maybe something has broken down? Is it that the autoclave is not working? Or is it that there's no monitoring and there's no maybe consequence to a lack of compliance to protocols? So maybe you find that on a couple of occasions, people were just discarding these samples without autoclaving. So now at this particular point, the risk will increase because the likelihood has increased. Now people are doing it, so it's likely that it will happen after the review. So consequence still remains the same. Maybe at this point, the risk goes back to a high. So now at this point, you need to re-strategize. So you look at the measures and you look at the practice. What is actually causing people not to follow the correct practice? So if you find that maybe the autoclave got broken down or it broke down, which means now you need to just fix it. Then after you fix it, you check for practice again for maybe another 2 to 3 months. Then after you come back, you find that maybe things have gone back to normal, and therefore maybe this is unlikely to happen, and this is a major. Therefore, maybe it has reduced to a medium because there was that lapse of a high risk. Therefore, you cannot automatically go back to low after 3 months. So you need to observe again for another 2 to 3 months. And after you observe that everything is going smoothly, you may now say, okay, now it's a bit rare that this will happen, and therefore your risk will go back to a low. So again, you need to come back and check. So you need to come back and check the same. So you can never close a register for risk assessment. So you come back and add more columns here and check again and again and again until you have a consistent low or acceptable risk for this particular scenario. So that's how you may handle this type of risk in the risk register. So yeah, so basically that's that on biosecurity risk or biosecurity risks assessment. So at this point, we've done both the biosafety and the biosecurity risks using the Excel template. So like I earlier mentioned, this is the last part or the last session for bio risk assessment. So in the next session, that is session 12, we're going to look at training. So we're going to look at the various training techniques as well as the materials that you may use to conduct your trainings. So see you in the next video.